Hey, let's get the teaching started. It's been a while since I said that actually. Welcome to episode 18 of AI for Humans. And today we're going to be talking about failures. And yeah, I think the red mark actually indicates when something has failed. In the past 17 episodes, we've been able to emphasize greatly on all of the things that AI can do amazingly well. We've gone all the way from data to models to predictions. It's been a very, very beautiful run. I think it would be completely dishonest of me to pretend like AI is great. There's no problem. Nope. Even the creator of ChatGPT actually said AI is cool, I guess. It actually is, I guess, in his X profile. But anyways, let's make sense of this. What is happening in AI? Because over time, AI has failed in many things. And for a non-power user, someone who doesn't use AI heavily, it might not be something you'd notice, but these things are actually happening, right? And these failures are actually harmful, right? They are failures that we can predict. We know when it can happen. We know things that can make it go wrong. And I feel like it's going to be very incomplete for this playlist or any AI tutorials or classes that does not actually discuss the failures of such systems. So we're going to talk about two major issues in AI. Issue number one is what we call a bias. Issue number two is a hallucination. I got that right. Yep. Bias and hallucination. So, what is a bias? What is an hallucination? And what exactly does it do in artificial intelligence? So, in this episode, I'm going to be telling you a lot of stories about things that happened, and maybe make it conceptual so that we don't actually mention any industries. But we're going to talk about bias and we're going to talk about hallucination. So, let's start with the bias. What exactly do we mean when we talk about the bias in artificial intelligence? Well, think of it like this. Where I come from, there's something we call, and this is actually very fun to say, Ojuro. We call it Ojuro. Ojuro is when you cheat, right? Ojuro is when you cheat, like you're supposed to share something equally, but you give one person more, you give one person less. And then when I was growing up, we normally make, say, Ojuro, you've done Ojuro. So maybe bias can actually be described as Ojuro. Remember that we said earlier that AI was trained on human data, right? Data from the internet, data from everywhere. AI was trained on that. And as a result of that, human data reflects things like human history. And human history, unfortunately, reflects things like inequality, bias, discrimination. And you can easily think of stuff like that when you hear terms like racism, right? Inequality. Okay, bias. These words are uncomfortable, but they are not in any way what we are going to pretend like does not exist. And unfortunately, some human texts, some texts that people have written, some books, some novels, all of these novels actually promote things like these guys that we emphasize up here: racism, inequality, bias, discrimination. It actually promotes it. And ChatGPT learned from this text. If you remember that episode, ChatGPT and all of that, they all learned from these books, these texts. They learned all of these things. And remember one thing we also mentioned: it learns and then it predicts. Now, after learning from all these textbooks where some authors were biased, some authors did not tell the complete story, some authors told a lie, it can output the same thing. When ChatGPT was initially came up, a lot of people came up with scenarios where they asked it questions relating to racism, and the answers it gave were very, very gross. Well, it wasn't like the system itself was bad, it was just trained on wrong data. Now, let me make this a bit simpler for us. One time, a company built an AI hiring tool. I'm not going to actually mention the name of the company, but you could research it online. It's actually a true story. So this tool was for AI hiring. So the idea here was that you're going to feed it your information, right? Instead of a human HR resource person looking at it, this person would actually, this tool itself would actually look at your CV, right? So you feed your CV into the tool will look at your CV, and then it will determine whether you could be hired or not. That's the work, right? And it was trained on 10 years of successful hiring programs. They trained the tool on all the best CVs and how they hired them, right? The tool was trained. And remember, this in this case is like fine-tuning, right? So it was just trained on CVs and hiring. That's what happened there. And then what was the problem? The problem here was that unfortunately, a lot of those people that were hired were male. Unfortunately, a lot of people hired in those 10 years that the tool was trained for were male. So the system did something. Every time someone came, a CV was sent and he noticed the word women, right? He would actually penalize to give a penalty for this and most likely would not hire the person. It took a while before they found this out, right? And then they scrapped the tool. But this is nobody's fault in the sense that it was simply fed data, and in that organization, more males are employed by female than females. So it looked at the trend. I was like, oh, we employ more males, we don't employ a lot of females. And then what happened? It identified male. It made anytime you saw male, it gave it a score of good candidates and female a score of otherwise. As a result of that, AI was wrong. So you can imagine how many qualified people actually applied for these jobs but did not get it. That's the main problem. Okay, let's move on to another issue. One time, and I will still not mention this, but an educational institute also realized that AI systems were misclassifying dark-skinned people. It was misclassifying dark-skinned people compared to light-skinned people. Like, it made 34% of errors here and only 1% of errors here. So sit with that for a minute and relax. Now, the mistake everybody made online was, oh my God, this AI is racist. This AI is this. AI doesn't hate anybody. And I think this is something you just have to reiterate over and over again. AI simply outputs its IO, right? Inputs, outputs. It studies its inputs, it makes outputs from that. So AI itself does not know anything. It is not smart. And remember, when we said ChatGPT is guessing, most people always deny that. They refute that statement. But this is where it is very clear. It doesn't know anything. It's just looking at the probabilities, looking at the math, and it's making assumptions. It's giving you the best assumption that it has. So yes, AI has a bias problem. Why? This is because of data. We're going to get back to that. Data is the number one issue why AI has a bias problem, but we're not going to focus on that now. Let's talk about problem number 2. Right? We'll talk about the problems and then we'll talk about the solutions. But why are we doing this? So that you know, so that you don't just blindly trust these systems. They are great, but they have problems too. It's just like technology. Everything that is good has its own problem. So let's talk about hallucinations. What exactly is an hallucination? I don't know if you've ever hallucinated before, or in Nigeria, there's something we call delulu. I like this word, delulu. So delulu is when they tell you that you're living in delusion. Like you say something and be like, that's delulu. So hallucinations are like delulu. It's when you say something and everyone's like, that's not true, right? Or that doesn't just make sense. Or you are living in a different world entirely, because where does that work? I mean, someone just comes to you and be like, 2 + 2 is 5. Delulu. So This is an hallucination. Remember one time actually in one of our episodes that we were mentioning that if you give AI very few examples, it will hallucinate. So, for example, if you say 2 raised to power 1 is 2, 2 raised to power 2 is 4, and then you ask it 2 raised to power 3. The problem here is that you've not given it a lot of examples. So AI can easily assume that 2 times 1 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, hence 2 times 3 is 6. To tell you this answer confidently, but it is wrong. Now, don't forget we had explained a few episodes before about how ChatGPT works. ChatGPT is not a brainiac, it's not a genius, it is a, and keep this word in mind, a predictor. It does probability, it guesses. So there's really no system in there that tells it if this answer is wrong, because it does not actually know what is wrong or right. It does not have a, in this input output, it does not have a step where it says stop, check the facts. It does not know when it doesn't know something. That's the idea. It doesn't know when it doesn't know, right? It just needs to complete the word. Its job is like someone who doesn't think before they talk, right? Their job is just to keep talking. You tell them your job is to keep talking. You can say any rubbish, but make sure you keep talking, because for every question you give it, it must give you an answer. So because of that system, it doesn't actually check itself. It doesn't even know whether what it's saying is right or wrong. It is giving you the highest probability by virtue of its math. And we discussed that a couple episodes ago, so you can go and actually watch that episode. It will make a lot of sense to you. What was the craziest thing that happened when it came to hallucination? A lawyer in New York one time actually used ChatGPT to research. There's something they call case precedents. So if I have a case against you, I look at previous cases that resembled our case. And then I'll be like, oh, so when it gets court of law, you tell the judge, this case was related to my case. This was what happened. And the judge would most likely bend his verdict to that because, precedent has a very great big deal in law. Promise you, I am not a lawyer, but this is just me showing you how much I'm addicted to this series they call Suits. Now, moving on, because I'm no Harvey Specter, a lawyer actually went to, court and he provided 6 case citations. He was citing cases from the past about previous cases that were related to his case, and it was crazy because these cases they gave him the names of judges, they gave him dates, they gave him quotes from those cases, and then when he submitted the cases to courts, they checked, and those cases were completely fabricated. It wasn't like he fabricated it. He gave AI, and AI built a complete set of cases that never existed. So, if you were to define hallucination, how would you define it? You would simply say hallucination is when the AI systems are confident. I promise you, this is something that they do very well. They are fluent, and most importantly, they are completely wrong. This is the definition of hallucination by Gildon's view. So what we are saying here is that AI has a bias problem. It was not trained on perfect data. And what do we mean by perfect data? I'll give you a very simple example. Think of it like this. I want to teach AI what it means to be 4 types of people, A, B, C, D, right? These are 4 types of people. And I want AI to understand what it means to be A, what it means to be B, what it means to be C, and what it means to be D. All of these people have their own features. They have things that make them unique, right? Maybe A, people are white and they talk fast. B are white and they talk slow. C are black and they talk fast. D are black and they talk slow. But I give it a lot of people here. Let's say this is 1,000, 100, this is 50, this is 20. My graph is bad, but you get the idea. I give it a lot of examples of white people who talk fast and more examples of white people who talk slow. A small amount of example of black people who talk fast and this amount of example of black people who talk slow. No matter how well we train it, it does not have enough data to be able to understand these features. And so, like that CV system, when you give it information, it will most likely misclassify as maybe a black person who talks fast or even a white person who talks slow because it does not learn enough. And that's the issue. AI has not learned enough of good data, right? So it's a big deal out there. Now, I have successfully scared you, I guess. So the question now is, what do you do about it, right? I used to see this stuff on Twitter a lot to say what to do. I like it. What to do? So, what do we do about this situation where we have artificial intelligence being biased or hallucinating? And I promise you, it's happening. You can Google it online. AI has messed up a lot of people and people who write projects. So don't worry, I think we'll get to that. So what do we do? Number one is that you want to be very aware, be very conscious, right? These cases actually exist all over the world, and you have to be very careful to what type of tools you use, what kind of information you give to artificial intelligence systems, right? Don't Somebody actually said if you ask ChatGPT to be your therapist, it will tell you the things you want to hear, but it will not actually tell you the truth. So it's a very crazy system. So be very aware of what's going on there, right? Be aware. That's number one. There's also the idea of being critical. And being critical here is simple, that what you want to do is don't trust AI with everything. Verify everything. And it's quite counterintuitive because most people who use AI use it because they don't want to go through the work. But verifying is actually more work. And this is something that actually happens a lot in the CS community, computer science. So when AI writes code, oh, trust me, somebody has to verify. AI hallucinates a lot with code. It writes a lot of rubbish. More good stuff, but it writes a lot of rubbish. So this is, and the third part is an industry problem. Everybody wants AI to have better data. So unfortunately, one of the things that happens a lot is people actually review the data that is fed into the AI systems, but it's not really as good, right? So right now, companies are making a lot of money off data review, right? So better data is actually going to make AI work like standard, 100%. Not 100%, but right, it's one of the things that will actually solve the issue. Because if bad data is fed into AI can only output bad results. Like we said, it has no fact-checking engine in the middle. So one of the most dangerous things you can actually do with AI right now is you can trust it blindly. You just give it a project and tell it to work, and you don't fact check. You don't check what it has done to be sure that it has done it right? And then the second most dangerous thing, I think, is if you don't use AI at all. Anyways, point is that you should be very critical, be very aware, be very informed, take care of the stuff that you consume, and don't just trust anything blindly. So now, because AI is not neutral and because it inherited like a lot of training data, right? So it's definitely hallucinates a lot and it does this confidently. So the truth is, when AI is telling you what is true and when it's telling you what is false, you cannot confidently tell unless you are an expert in that field. You cannot confidently tell if what was false was actually false. So this doesn't mean you now become anti-AI, like, oh, never again. But it makes you an intelligent user of AI. Like, now you know that for everything you see, you want to double check, right? Next episode, we have a deeper question, right? And it's not just what goes wrong. Now it's who is responsible. So AI ethics is a very big deal, right? When AI makes a decision, when AI does something wrong, who should answer for it? It's a bit related to game theory, but quite expansive in this case. So AI ethics is one of the most important things happening in AI today. I promise, I know this was quite a drag of an episode. I really didn't enjoy preparing for it either, but at the same time, I've got to be faithful to what I do, which is show you the entire thing in retrospect, like from A to Z, right? And as much as I enjoy doing the calculations and explain the concepts, I think this is also something that everybody needs to know. AI is not a perfect system, and you need to know that it is very, very, very dangerous when not used properly. So thank you very much, and I'm going to see you in episode 19, and our playlist is coming to an end. All right, bye.